Bruce Lee kick, you don't shake your eyes, because when you shake your eyes, you cannot see Bruce Lee kick. You know how fast?
What if I told you that some of the most extraordinary human achievements were performed by one man, and if they hadn't been captured on film, no one would believe they were possible? Imagine someone moving so fast that 1970s cameras couldn't properly capture their movements, or someone so powerful they could send a 300-pound punching bag flying through the air with a single kick. These aren't tall tales or martial arts legends. These are the documented feats of Bruce Lee, the man who revolutionized martial arts and changed cinema forever. Today, we're talking about the most incredible recorded moments of Bruce Lee's life, feats so extraordinary that without video evidence, they would sound more like superhero stories than reality. But first, let me ask you, what makes the difference between a skilled martial artist and someone who pushes the boundaries of human capability? The answer lies in these remarkable moments we're about to explore. Let's start with perhaps the most famous demonstration of Bruce Lee's power, the legendary one-inch punch. In 1964, at the Long Beach International Karate Championship, Lee demonstrated something that seemed to defy physics. Standing just 1 inch away from his volunteer, Lee delivered a punch that sent a grown man flying backwards 16 feet, landing squarely in a chair. This wasn't just a party trick, it was a demonstration of Lee's understanding of body mechanics and explosive power generation that he had perfected through years of training. The one-inch punch wasn't created overnight. Its origins trace back to Lee's training in Wing Chun under Grandmaster Ip Man in the 1950s. Lee took the close-quarters combat principles of Wing Chun and refined them, experimenting with different stances and angles until he created something entirely new. The secret wasn't just in the punch itself, but in Lee's incredible speed and precision, factors that made this technique nearly impossible for others to replicate.
It's his own best example of the potency of his beliefs. He's detected his own weaknesses and limitations, and by the application of intellect and dint of hard work, he alone has overcome them.
Speaking of power, let's talk about something that forced equipment manufacturers to rethink their designs. Traditional punching bags, typically weighing around 110 pounds, proved inadequate for Lee's training. He would regularly burst through or rupture standard bags, forcing him to seek out specially made equipment weighing over 300 pounds. Even more incredibly, Lee could send these heavyweight bags flying several feet into the air with his kicks, a feat that would leave most people struggling to move the bag an inch. But raw power wasn't Lee's only extraordinary attribute. His control and strength-to-weight ratio were equally remarkable. In one famous demonstration, Lee performed push-ups using only 2 fingers. Not content with this already impressive feat, he went on to complete over 100 push-ups using only his thumb. And if that wasn't enough, he could perform hundreds of one-arm pull-ups. Perhaps most astounding was his ability to do over 1,500 push-ups in a single session without rest. Here's something that might sound like science fiction. Bruce Lee was actually too fast for cameras to capture properly. During the filming of The Green Hornet in the 1960s, the production team faced an unprecedented problem. The standard cameras of the time, shooting at 24 frames per second, couldn't properly capture Lee's movements. In many fight scenes, the footage would show Lee standing still while his opponents fell around him. Not because of clever editing, but because his strikes were too fast for the camera to register. Lee had to deliberately slow down his movements so they could be captured on film. Just how fast was he? Lee could throw 9 punches in a single second and execute kicks in just 6 seconds. To put this in perspective, modern high-speed cameras can shoot at 240 frames per second or higher. But in the 1960s, even catching Lee's basic movements required him to perform at a fraction of his actual speed. Perhaps one of the most incredible demonstrations of Lee's reflexes and control came in his training methods. While the catch-a-fly with chopsticks scene from The Karate Kid impressed audiences, Lee took this concept to another level. According to multiple sources, he would practice catching grains of rice thrown into the air using chopsticks. While perfect footage of this feat doesn't exist, numerous witnesses attested to his remarkable success rate at this seemingly impossible task.
He was often called the dragon, and when he performed this movement, his body hung straight like a flag.
Among Lee's most impressive physical feats was the dragon flag exercise, which he invented and which later gained fame when Sylvester Stallone performed it in Rocky IV. This exercise involves supporting your entire body horizontally on a bench using only your shoulders, keeping your body completely rigid. The core strength required for this movement is almost superhuman, yet Lee could perform it with apparent ease.
Bruce Lee used to do this in demonstrations at tournaments. The first time I saw him do it was 1966 International Karate Championships. Well, I didn't think much of it, but when you put somebody in front of you and you say, well, there's no power in that particular punch, well, then that's when I learned what they call the famous Bruce Lee one-inch punch. In actuality, there's no such thing as the one-inch punch. I don't know where the one-inch punch concept came from. If you watch Bruce Lee in his demonstrations, he was always throwing the punch. He would stand like this, somebody would put a focus pad on their chest, and he would thrust forward to demonstrate how much power he had in that forward-hand strike.
The impact of Lee's extraordinary abilities extended far beyond mere demonstrations. He revolutionized martial arts training and influenced countless fighters across different disciplines. Boxing legends like Sugar Ray Leonard and Muhammad Ali studied his techniques. Modern MMA fighters, including John Jones and Anderson Silva, cite Lee as a major influence on their fighting styles. Perhaps most importantly, Lee's recorded feats weren't just about physical prowess. They demonstrated the pas sense 9's ability of transcending traditional limitations. His creation of Jeet Kune Do philosophy emphasized adaptability and efficiency over rigid forms. This approach revolutionized martial arts and laid the groundwork for modern mixed martial arts. Lee's philosophy of using no way as way, having no limitation as limitation, wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was demonstrated in every recorded moment of his training and performances. He showed that the human body could achieve things that seemed impossible, but only through dedicated training and understanding of body mechanics. What makes these recorded moments even more precious is the tragic brevity of Lee's life. At just 32 years old, Lee passed away at the height of his career, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire millions. These film demonstrations of his extraordinary abilities serve as proof that one person can push the boundaries of human potential far beyond what most people believe possible. The question isn't just whether these feats would be believed without recording, it's whether anyone else will ever be able to replicate them all. While modern athletes and martial artists have achieved incredible things, the combination of speed, power, control, and philosophy that Lee demonstrated remains unmatched. These recorded moments reveal something profound about human potential. They show us that what we often dismiss as impossible might just be unexplored territory. Bruce Lee didn't just perform these incredible feats, he documented them, studied them, and most importantly, taught others that such achievements were possible through dedicated training and understanding of one's own body. As we look back at these remarkable recorded moments, we're left with an important realization. Sometimes the most unbelievable things are absolutely true, and sometimes one person can come along and completely redefine what we think is possible. Bruce Lee was that person, and thankfully we have the footage to prove it. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories about martial arts legends and human potential. Have you ever seen any of these Bruce Lee moments before? What impressed you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
In the world of martial arts, few names carry as much weight as Bruce Lee. But beneath the surface of his legendary status lies a shocking truth about the extreme methods that forged his extraordinary abilities. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the dangerous and revolutionary training techniques that made Bruce Lee a legend. At just 135 pounds, Bruce Lee possessed strength that seemed to defy physics. His power-to-weight ratio was extraordinary, leading many to question how someone so lean could generate such explosive force. The answer lies in training methods so intense that they would make modern fitness experts nervous. Historical clips of Lee training.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Lee broke away from traditional martial arts doctrine in a controversial move that would change combat sports forever. While other martial artists avoided weight training, believing it would make them slow and inflexible, Lee embraced it. But with a twisted innovation that was uniquely his own. Lee's training philosophy was built on 4 dangerous pillars. 1. Maximum force generation through extreme isometrics. 2nd, explosive speed training at the edge of human capability. 3. Unconventional strength development. 4th, brutal endurance conditioning. But what made these methods truly revolutionary was how he combined them into a single, punishing system. Demonstration of isometric exercises. One of Lee's most controversial methods was his revolutionary approach to isometric training, pushing the boundaries of what many thought possible. He would spend grueling hours pushing against immovable objects with maximum force, attempting to engage every single muscle fiber in his body. This technique, while remarkably effective for building strength.
Well, this brings up something. You were in one of Bruce Lee's great movies.
Return of the Dragon.
Return of the Dragon.
Yeah.
And this is a famous, famous fight scene that you had with Bruce Lee.
I still consider it a classic.
It holds up. I watched it today, and you know they've advanced fight scenes so much, but this really holds up. It's an amazing fight scene.
Well, I think the main reason, Bruce was really ahead of his time. And I worked out with Bruce Lee, and I worked out for 3 years. That's when I held the world title. And then he went to Hong Kong to pursue his movie career, did a couple of movies, very successful. So he called me up and said, you know, I want to do a movie with a fight scene that everyone will remember called Return of the Dragon. He said, would you come over and do the fight scene with me? I said, well, do I have to lose? He says, yeah, you have to lose. So I said, all right. So I went over there, and you know, I'd seen his first 2 movies. I said, you know, the guys you fight don't even have a chance. I mean, they don't even touch you, you know? And he said, no, we'll make this a seesaw battle. And so we made it fight back and forth, and it became a classic.
That was unusual at the time, because in that fight scene, you knock him down a few times, and it's pretty close, and he didn't allow that, did he?
No, I was the only one ever to really do that, you know, fighting. But again, you know, he respected me because of my ability as a world champion at the time.
Carried serious risks of tissue damage and nervous system fatigue that would make modern trainers hesitate. The intensity of Lee's isometric training was almost frightening to witness. He would push against concrete walls relentlessly until his muscles visibly trembled and shook, far beyond what most would consider the point of failure. During these sessions, he'd hold strenuous positions until complete muscular failure occurred, often pushing through the burning sensation that would cause others to stop. Perhaps most daringly, he would attempt to lift what he knew were impossible weights, engaging in what he called overcoming isometrics, applying maximum force against an immovable object. This method wasn't just about physical strength. It was about pushing past mental barriers that typically limit human performance. Lee believed that by forcing his muscles to work against unmovable resistance, he could recruit more muscle fibers than traditional training methods allowed.
Before I let you go, we are approaching the 40th anniversary that involved one Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Put that photo up. And I want to ask the captain about this photo almost 40 years later. Tell me, what do you recall about this almost 40 years ago?
Oh, that's my first trip to Hong Kong with my good friend Bruce Lee. He said, come on, we're going to make a movie. You can be the villain. I said, sure. Why not? And I flew over to Hong Kong, and I was the villain. And that ended up being the last movie that he made.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great photo, though.
Oh, yeah, it was fun working with Bruce. He was a great guy.
Would often incorporate these isometric holds into his regular training, creating a unique hybrid system that challenged his body in ways that hadn't been seen before in martial arts training. The risk of injury was always present, but Lee believed the potential benefits outweighed the dangers, even though this method of training placed enormous stress on his nervous system and connective tissues. Speed training techniques of Bruce Lee. Lee's speed training methods were particularly alarming even by today's advanced training standards. He believed in pushing his movements to superhuman velocities, often training at speeds that made his contemporaries nervous about the risk of serious injury. His approach to speed development was revolutionary but dangerous, combining elements that most trainers would hesitate to put together. At the core of his speed training was an almost obsessive focus on explosive power. He would practice punches with explosive resistance, using specialized equipment and rubber bands to create tension that fought against his lightning-fast strikes. This wasn't just about throwing fast punches. Lee would perform every exercise at maximum velocity, whether it was bodyweight movements, weight training, or martial arts techniques. He believed that training at anything less than maximum speed was a waste of precious training time. What made his speed training even more intense was his use of weighted clothing during these high-velocity drills. While others might use weights for strength training, Lee would wear them during speed work, creating a dangerous but effective combination that forced his muscles to adapt to both resistance and velocity simultaneously. Perhaps most remarkably, he would train multiple muscle groups at high speeds simultaneously, coordinating complex movements that challenged both his nervous system and muscular control. This integrated approach to speed training was years ahead of its time, but it came with significant risks that modern sports science has only recently begun to understand. The 1965 fight with Wong Jack Man marked a dramatic turning point in Lee's training approach. After this legendary confrontation, Lee realized his conditioning needed to reach even more extreme levels. This led to a complete overhaul of his training methods, pushing him to gain 25 pounds of muscle while maintaining his legendary speed. Lee's daily training routine was nothing short of punishing, stretching from early morning until late evening in a relentless pursuit of martial arts perfection. His day would begin at the crack of dawn, with the morning session running from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. This grueling start included a challenging 5-mile run while wearing a weighted vest, pushing his cardiovascular system to its limits before most people had even started their day. Following this, he would dedicate 2 intense hours to technical martial arts practice, meticulously refining his movements and techniques. The morning session would continue with an hour of specialized strength training, culminating in core conditioning exercises performed until complete muscle failure. The afternoon session, running from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., focused on explosive power and speed development. During these hours, Lee would engage in intensive speed training drills, followed by power development exercises that pushed the boundaries of human performance. He would then move on to skill-specific practice, honing the techniques that would later become legendary in martial arts circles. The afternoon would conclude with his notorious isometric training, where he would push his muscles to their absolute limits through static holds and resistance work. As evening approached, rather than winding down, Lee would begin his final training block from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. This session took on a more holistic approach, combining additional physical conditioning with mental development. He would engage in supplementary conditioning work, followed by dedicated mental training sessions. The evening would also include deep philosophical study, as Lee believed that mental acuity was just as important as physical prowess. The day would conclude with technique refinement, where he would perfect the movements and combinations he had practiced earlier, often working well into the night to achieve the precision he demanded of himself. What set Lee apart was his scientific approach to training. He studied anatomy, physics, and biomechanics to understand how to push human performance to its absolute limits. He maintained detailed records of his experiments with different training methods, often using himself as a test subject for dangerous new techniques. Perhaps no exercise better exemplifies Lee's extreme approach than the dragon flag. This core exercise, which he helped popularize, requires extraordinary strength and control. Lying back on a bench, supporting only the upper shoulders, the entire body is raised and lowered as one rigid unit, a move that tests the absolute limits of human core strength. Lee's cardiovascular training was equally intense. He developed a system that combined high-intensity interval training, weighted endurance work, combat-specific conditioning, progressive overload principles. He structured his cardio like boxing rounds, but with a crucial difference. He would gradually increase both the intensity and duration, pushing his heart and lungs to their absolute limits. Bruce Lee's approach transcended mere physical training, embracing a comprehensive fusion of Eastern philosophy and Western psychology. However, modern sports medicine has identified serious risks in his methods, including nervous system burnout, joint damage, and cardiovascular strain.